Well, Eric Girard, Finance Minister, Quebec government tabling their final budget before the fall election. Let's get some reaction on that front from Eric Duhaime, the leader of the Quebec Conservative Party. He's on the line. Mr. Duhaime, Eric, welcome back to the program.
Always a pleasure.
How do you view this last CAQ budget before the election?
Well, it's not really a budget, actually. If you look at it, deeply, you realize that, they're postponing a lot of decisions. There's not real new announcements. And even worse, they're putting $1.2 billion aside. So the leader that is going to be elected with the CAQ in less than a month is going to be able, to announce a few goodies just before the election launch. So it's kind of a weird budget, and the fundamentals are still bad. I mean, there's nothing for the cost of living that is going up the roof. People in Quebec, like elsewhere, have huge problems, but the government refuses to give them back money in their pocket or abolish the carbon tax like we've been asking for months. And they're still increasing the size of the state. No matter what they're saying, there's going to be more bureaucrats in Quebec next year than there were last year. So it's a slippery slope, and we keep going in the same way. The costs for healthcare are increasing way too fast compared to our richness, over 4%. It's not sustainable in the long run. So it's a lazy budget overall. That's how I would qualify it.
So how would you tackle some of these things, right? Because you're providing financial support right now for Quebecers, right? Cost of living stuff. Let's say you lower taxes. Well, then the deficit would grow larger, right? So, how would you tackle that right now? Because I think they're also trying to deal with a deficit which is quite high.
There's a few things that can be done very easily. First off, when we're talking about the carbon tax, that's not going to cost a penny to the Quebec government, because you just need to abolish the Green Fund, because 100% of the money is going to a fund where they're subsidizing businesses with that money. So we want to abolish that altogether. Secondly, the CAQ candidates for the leadership have been talking about exploiting our natural gas in Quebec during the leadership race. Well, there's no willingness on the government side yet to go that way. That would provide, a creation of wealth in Quebec, huge jobs, and no, they're not moving on that front neither. The other thing that we also want to change is to abolish the Fonds de développement économique, the Economic Development Fund that is funding businesses. It's all a bunch of subsidies. Yesterday, they've put another $725 million into that fund. That's the fund that was funding Northvolt and Lyon Electric and all the other fiascos of the battery file. That needs to stop. Quebecers cannot sustain that in the long run. So those are the kind of cuts that could be done to make sure that we could put more money back in the wallet of the taxpayers.
Let me ask you about what's next for the CAQ, right? Because they are going to select a leader April 12th, and it's Bernard Drinville or Christine Frechette. Those are the two candidates here. And it seems as they have their leadership race, they are looking at things, and it's different between each candidate, but sometimes you see some of the things they're proposing, and it seems like there could be some reaction to a party like yours.
Yeah.
What do you do if the CAQ, they get a new leader, whoever it is, and then they start taking some of your policies, whether it's natural gas exploration, that kind of stuff, and they start to take some of those ideas? Do you view that as a threat to your party?
Well, first, it's so true what you're saying that it's even the caricature in the Journal de Montréal today. You see myself outside of the National Assembly with my program in my hands, and you see Bernard Drinville and Christine Frechette in my back trying to copy it. And it's becoming a joke, but it's every single day. It seems that there's a new page of our program that they're stealing. But personally, I see it positively, because what it means is that our ideas are not crazy. It's the opposite. Like, we have the best program, and the other parties want to copy it. And when you're in politics, first and foremost, you want to make sure that there's ideas that are moving forward. I'm not just there for myself, nor are other conservative candidates. The first thing we want is to make sure that those ideas are implemented in Quebec. And if the other parties are stealing the ideas and putting them in place, I think it's a good news for Quebecers. So I applaud that. I applaud it. And at the end of the day, I'm confident that in October, people would prefer the original to the copy. And I believe that, it's always better to have the person who truly believes in it, not the one who saw a poll and thinks it's a good way to get reelected. And that's how I see it. And we're we're going to evaluate if I'm right or not next October.
Thanks for alerting me of that. While you were talking there, I pulled up the Y editorial cartoon from Journal de Montréal this morning, and yes, indeed, it shows Christine Frichette and Bernard Drinville basically copying your program for a lot of their things. Okay, well, imitation is the most sincere form of flattery, they say, right? Okay, so let me ask you about the you brought up carbon tax, right?
Yeah.
And gas taxes in this province. Now, Quebec doesn't have, by definition, a carbon tax per se, but we're part of that carbon market with California. Is that correct here? How it works? Can you tell our listeners how that adds to the cost of things?
Well, currently it's about 13 cents per liter, and it's a tax that every single year is going up. It's an elevator tax, but it only goes up. And it's only Quebec and California that are paying it right now. And as I said, 100% of the funds that are collected through that tax are going into a green fund to subsidize businesses. It's unfair. I understand that when it was put in place, there was the federal carbon tax project that was already also on the table and was actually implemented until almost a year ago. And it ended last April 1st, 2025. And but at that time it was okay because anyway there would be a tax, and it was better to have our own system than having the federal system. But now that the rest of Canada is not paying a penny on carbon tax, it's completely unfair for Quebecers, not just for people who are listening to us and need to fill their cards today, but also for our businesses. I mean, think of our farmers, our softwood lumber industry. Like, they're competing against Ontario, against New Brunswick, and they have a tax that others don't have. And in some businesses, it's a huge percentage of their spending. Mm-hmm. So, we're deliberately putting our businesses in a disadvantaged position. And also, people who are listening and say, oh, I have an electric car, or I don't have a car, I use the public transit, but you're also paying because it impacts every single thing that you consume. When if the grocery store is going up, it's partly because there's a carbon tax in Quebec as well.
Let me ask you about healthcare because you brought it up, right? It is a growth section of the budget at 4.1%. That's far outpacing other items, but I'm sure Quebecers would say, well, I want my healthcare services to get better, and they would say the system needs more money. So, how would you tackle that, Eric? Because, Quebecers are struggling with the quality of their healthcare services, and I think a lot of them would say, no, that's a good thing that we're increasing the budget.
Over the last year, the GDP in Quebec increased by 1.1%. Our spending in healthcare increased by 4.1%. It doesn't take a genius, and you don't need a PhD in maths to figure out that in the long term it's not sustainable. You cannot increase your spending that fast every single year. And also, I'd like to remind you that there was a baby boom in Quebec in the late 40s, early 50s, and those people are going to necessitate much more healthcare services in the next few years, and it's going to be much more expensive. So we need to reform the system. And that's why we're the only party saying that we need to add the private sector. We need to do like all the best healthcare systems in the world. If you look at the Netherlands or the Scandinavian countries or Germany or even France, they all have parallel systems, public-private. And our proposal as conservative is to say, look, if the public sector is more expensive than the private sector, then the person could use, their healthcare card and go to a private clinic or private hospital. And if the waiting lists are too long, are unacceptable in the public sector, then they could also go to the private sector and the public will pay. And what we see is that, for example, for the eyes currently, there's no rule, that the private sector is allowed, and there's no forbiddenness. So it's a physician for the eyes could do almost 2 times more patients a day than in the private sector than in the public sector. And if you look at countries where there's no waiting list, where 100% of the population has a family doctor, the percentage that they're giving to the healthcare system there, like for the Netherlands, is 3% less than what Quebec is doing right now. Our system is inefficient. It's not because we don't put enough money. We're putting $1.3 billion every single year in the system. It needs to stop. We cannot afford that system, and people cannot wait as much as they are right now.
Eric, got to leave it there. I want to thank you so much for coming on this morning, talking to our listeners.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much, Elias.
Eric Duhaime is leader of the Quebec Conservative Party.
I'm Luke Wilson. Join me each week for Film Never Lies. Since retiring from the NFL, I've had a lot on my mind, and now I've got my own show. So if you're tired of lazy takes, if you want honest conversations, join us each week. Film Never Lies, available on all TSN platforms and the iHeartRadio app.